As Alan said, my name is Carl Atiya Swanson. I am a theater maker and writer and an arts guy around town. I'm also the associate director at Springboard for the arts. So I get to be in this conversation wearing two hats. One is an independent artist who applies for grants and have been through that cycle of joy and elation and despair that sometimes accompanies it. And also as a representative of an organization that's committed to helping artists make a living and a life. So we have grant resources, we have a lot of different opportunities to help you in the grant process. So I'm really excited to wear both of those hats in this conversation. Just running down the line here, Kathee Foran, who is the program officer for the Artist Initiative and Cultural Community Partnership programs at the Minnesota State Arts Board. Becky Hoffmann, who's a grants writer, and some guy who's played in a bunch of bands over the course of the last few years, John Munson at the end there. Before we get into conversation, I asked them to talk a little bit about their work and experiences. Just by show of hands, who in the room is a musician or independent artist of some kind? That's just about everybody. If you're not one of those, do you know or love an independent musician or artist? Thank you. Excellent. Good job. Who here has applied for a grant before? Okay. Who here has never applied for a grant before? Who here has looked at a grant process and been like, nah, I'm not doing that? All right. Cool. So we're here to help get over that nah, give some tips from our own experience and from our organizational perspectives around what the grant process can be and look like. I also really like that it's demystifying in the title. I feel like we make things less mystifying by talking about them openly. And to that end, one of the things that can definitely make grants and grant making inaccessible is the use of jargon or specific words. And so because I do live in that world, if I or if one of the panelists starts using some jargony stuff, just shoot your hand up and be like, what on earth do you mean by outcomes in that situation? So let's have that back and forth. And we'll try to keep this as conversational and as informal, despite this table and microphone setup, as much as we can. So, without further ado, Kathee, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I've actually been in the Twin Cities community here for the last 40-some years, and working primarily on the other side of the fundraising fence, raising money. I've spent 20 years of my career within the Heart of the Beast, Puppet and Mask Theater. When I left there, I took this job here at the State Arts Board, so I went from a place with no rules to a place with all rules. And so one of the things I try to do with applicants is help them understand where our parameters are as far as what can we do and what can't we do, and where the flexibility is within the system. I do run the two programs that are for individual artists. We have other programs as well that are open to individual artists, but I'm not in charge of those.
Yeah, Becky.
My name is Becky Hoffmann, and my background is in librarianship, but I'm now using those skills to do artist management type jobs. And I work with John and his band, The New Standards, and I work with Dessa and Jeremy Messersmith, a couple of their artists in town. And I'm doing
Can you talk in the mic? It's hard to hear you.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I do show coordination and tour management and those sorts of things. And I also do grant writing. I'm a grant writer for hire, and I also do grant writing for projects that I'm involved with. I've written proposals for the State Arts Board, Regional Arts Councils, sometimes successfully, sometimes, actually a lot of times unsuccessfully. But I feel like I've, gotten some experience on the way and sort of honed the skill a little bit. And it is kind of a special skill set that you need to have to do it. There's kind of a language of grants that you sort of have to learn, and it's something that you can figure out just by getting experience and going to review panels and things like that, and just sort of learning to speak the language a little bit. I'm right now administrating a grant for the New Standards for the Arts for Minnesota, and I'm doing project reporting and kind of seeing the other side of that once you've scored the money.
Yeah. I'm John Munson, and I'm a musician about town. I've lived here my whole life, and I definitely would have fallen into that last group that you mentioned of probably 10 years ago for sure, because it was all about just kind of going it alone, and I was definitely came up through the DIY side of the rock music scene, which was, kind of the punk rock idea of play shows to fund your records, and if you can make it, great, and if you can't, then get out of the pool, basically, because you're just taking up space. And then a few years ago, with the New Standards Project, that is something that I'm doing with a guy named Chan Poling, who's the leader of a group called The Suburbs, who is probably some of you are maybe familiar with, and a guy named Steve Rome, who's the vibraphone player. We started doing something that felt like it would be appropriate, and it seemed that it was appropriate in performing arts centers. We're doing performing arts shows in the city here, and we're like, there's got to be other places where we could do this. And there are many places where you can do it around the state. And we're like, how could we figure out a way to do shows in the kinds of venues that we want to perform and that we feel are best suited for our music and not completely lose our asses? And it turned out that the Minnesota State Arts Board had programs and funding to support the kinds of things that we wanted to do through their arts tour. And I think actually the first introduction that we got to that, though, was through the Minnesota Music Coalition's Caravan du Nord, which is a program that has been funded by the Minnesota State Arts Board through their arts tour in the past. And so that gave us kind of our first taste of that. And then after we did that, we were like, let's do more of this, and we worked with a grant writer to get funding to do that, and it's really opened up a whole another avenue, another way to reach people, and another way to make some money doing it too, which is of course important. It's if you want to continue doing music, you have to get paid.
Yeah, that is a if you take nothing away from this panel, if you want to keep doing music, you should get paid. That is a good takeaway. Before we start conversation, I think because we've talked about State Arts Board and the Arts Tours Grant, I think it makes a little sense to talk a little bit about the environment in which we're having this conversation, in that we are living in the great state of Minnesota, which in 2008 voted to pass the Legacy Amendment, which is a small tax that everybody in the state pays that goes to fund arts, environment, and conservation efforts. And through that pool of funds, funding goes to the State Arts Board. It also goes to the regional arts councils. So there's a metropolitan regional arts councils here for the metro area that has funding to give to individual artists and to arts organizations. There are regional arts councils all around the state that do that same kind of grant making. So I think it's important to say that we have a really rich granting environment here in Minnesota, not only through our state mechanisms, but also through some really great foundations, notably the Jerome Foundation, which does artist grants, the McKnight Foundation, which has artist fellowships, and the Knight Foundation, which currently has the Knight Arts Challenge open right now. The deadline is April 28th to get an idea in for what to do in the city of St. Paul. So we are in a really great environment for having grants as part of your work and part of the way you fund your work. I also think it's important to point out that grants are part of a way that you fund your work. If you are, just like a healthy diet does not consist of PB&Js or pizza alone, having a good diversity of income streams, it makes you a healthier artist, and grants can definitely be a part of that. From your vantage point, so to the folks who are NAS out there, what would you say is the best way that you have gone about to prepare for writing a grant? So what are the steps you take? Kathee, can you talk about that? Maybe both from the State Arts Board, but also from your Heart of the Beast experience.
Sure. The most important thing in terms of the State Arts Board is to start early. We have a deadline coming up May 19th for individual artists in the performing arts. And there are a number of resources that we have for you. It's really about laying your groundwork and being prepared to write that application. The application itself is really short. It's no more than a 2-page narrative that you write, including, and there's also a budget, and you submit a work sample. But understanding what we're looking for, and also understanding from the panelist perspective, Our grants are determined by a panel of volunteers who are active in the field that's being reviewed. So in the case of music, these are all musicians, but they're coming at it from all different perspectives. Some are vocal, some are hip hop, some are classical, some are, on and on. And so I'll have 8 people around the table, all from different parts of the state, different age ranges, different ethnicities. The idea is to represent the state as best we can in 8 people. And so those folks are reading all of these applications as volunteers. So you have no idea knowing whether they were exhausted when they read that application or whether they, came to it fresh in the morning. And they all come with a pre-score. They've listened to the work sample. And then they come together at our office and we listen to the work sample again and we talk about it for 10 minutes. And then they do a final score. So the need for your application to be really clear, succinct, and compelling is sort of paramount, frankly. And the panel is looking to find that this is a stretch for you in our program.
If I may say so, I've taken the challenge of participating as a panelist with the Minnesota State Arts Board because I feel like if this is a thing that I'm going to take from, it's a thing that I want to give to, and I feel like anybody in this room who thinks that they want to participate in grant getting should consider volunteering either for the Minnesota State Arts Board as a musician, panelist, if that's your art form, or for the Regional Arts Council too. I mean, they are looking for people like you who are interested, active members of the arts scene, and they'll vet you and stuff, and you have to be legit, but they need people. And to be quite honest, when I did it, it was a quite diverse group, but I would say the only person who was practicing what I would say was music that was really, modern, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so if you feel like when you look at the recipients of the Artist Initiative Awards or the Arts Tour Awards, and you're like, the group that I'm interested in is unrepresented here, that means that you need to go and represent as a panelist so that more of the sorts of things that you're interested in seeing are getting awards, because you can advocate for the things that you care about, and you can make a case for the things that you care about getting an award.
Yeah.
I mean, many of the proposals have merit, but I mean, you like what you like, as they say.
I also really love that because that is, when you talk about think about what you as an artist can influence in the grant process, you probably stop at like, I'm going to write this thing, it's going to be really good, and then it goes off into some mystery land. What you're saying, John, is that you can also influence the grant process from the other side and be a part of that building that ecosystem.
And not only that, I think the other thing is that it's an open panel review process. So if you're brave, and you really do have to be pretty brave, I would say,
yeah,
you can go to the panel review and sit and watch while your work is critiqued by these 8 people. You can't say anything. You just have to sit there quietly. Most of the people will not know who you are, but they might have some suspicions. And then they'll critique your work in front of you. And it can be very eye-opening. And I guarantee you that if you do that and you have an unsuccessful proposal the first time, the next time you'll be much more likely to have a favorable outcome, I would say, or at least you'll increase your chances significantly.
yeah.
I think attending the review panel is a really good way to do your homework. Even if you are going to be applying for a grant opportunity the following year, to go to the previous year's review panel just to sit in. They're usually about, how long would you say, Kathee? Like 8 minutes long, depending?
Yeah, per application, about 8 to 10
minutes long. And so if you sit through a few of them, you really get a sense of what panelists are looking for and how they go through all the list of criteria just sort of point by point. And you have to make sure that you've touched on everything. You can also, if you aren't able to attend your own panel review, you can listen to it later. The State Arts Board will send you the audio for it later, so you can always, listen to what people thought about your project. A lot of times granting organizations will publish the application, the print application of successful applicants from the previous years. So for for McKnight, I think, and the State Arts Board, you can look at successful proposals that might be on the scale of yours or maybe a completely different scope, but I think it's really good to be able to sort of do your homework and read what a successful proposal looks like and what sort of language do they use and how detailed do they go into. Do they really say 1,000 words per section, or can I get this done in just a few sentences? So you just kind of scope out the playing field a little bit and do your homework that way.
The other thing is that we now attach your audio review to your application along with, this is at the end of the process, along with your scores in each criterion. And we tell you what was competitive on your panel. So in the case of music, I usually have 2 panels. And so competitive on one panel might have been a 35 and competitive on another might have been a 32. And we will tell you your rank. So, and then that can be sort of the good news, bad news. Well, they made 10 grants and I was 11th. But that tells you, oh, I'm really close. And so it looks like I just need to tweak this and I can, that maybe next year it'll work out for me. The other thing to know is that every year it's different people around the table. So you're never writing to the same audience. So it is one of those things, though, that I have seen people really progress. So they did dismally one year and then listen to that audio, look at those scores, talk with me, really help find out, because oftentimes when you hear this, you're mad. I mean, I've been on the other side of it. You are mad as hell, And it's like, couldn't they read this? And so sometimes it helps to talk to the program officer and just sort of get somebody who's not as invested as you are, obviously, to be able to say, well, look at it this way. And, you may not agree with this point, but that person that was their opinion. And just try to work around it for next time.
Yeah.
I had that very experience that you're describing. Becky and I went in to have a conversation with the program officer after an unsuccessful grant, and because I listened to the audio and I was like, they loved it. Why didn't we get the grant? It can be very confusing, and you're not used to being critiqued in that way, where it's just like it's either black or it's white. You either get it or you don't. You don't get half the audience going like, yeah, we really liked it, which feels like a standing ovation sometimes. It's either is or it isn't. And the program officer was very clear about what the issues were and what we needed to address. And the next year we went on and we had a successful application. So and I'd like to say that the Minnesota State Arts Board is very generous with their time in terms of speaking with applicants based on everything that I've heard from a lot of different people who've applied into several different grants actually.
And not just after your application has been reviewed, you can meet with the program officer while you're working on your project. If you finish it in enough time, they'll take a look at it and give you feedback that will help you just sort of tailor it to.
Yeah, and that's our requirement is that you get it to us 2 weeks in advance of the deadline for draft review. I don't review work samples because I'm not an expert in all the various disciplines, but I do review the narrative, the artist plan, the budget. I'll take a look at a resume, and as an outside party, I can say, well, you're talking about how you need this piece of equipment, but I don't see it in the budget. Thing that just totally blew by you.
Yeah.
Or that, boy, I don't quite get what you mean here. And so then all of a sudden you have that opportunity to tweak it and make it clearer.
Yeah, sometimes you're so deep inside your process that you don't even know what you're not really presenting or missing. Yeah.
I think there's sometimes maybe a tendency to think about the people who have the money and an oppositional relationship with them. Program officers like Kathee, program officers at foundations, they're there to help you. They want you to get money. they want to fund your really awesome project. So if you are respectful in your approach, in a timely manner, really, and ask for their support, they will help you. They want to help you because it looks good if they fund some really awesome stuff too. That is a reciprocal relationship in that part of the process. I also wanted to add that sort of the best thing to the earlier point about listening to audio and things like that, the way that I learned how to write grants was I called up the MRAC, the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council. I just asked them to send me successful grant proposals, and I read through and deconstructed and then reconstructed them. And that's how I learned how to write grants, because it was right there in front of you in a practical document. I also have not gotten grants. We started touching on this in these conversations. Here's a short story about not getting a grant. Sitting in a review panel, so 10 people arrayed around a table. We're rating on a scale of 5. They've read through it. It's all sounded really good, really great conversation. The hands are going up. People are giving us their scores. 5, 5, 5, 5, 4, 5, 5, 2. Oh God, how did that happen? What happened there? And I knew, because I was sitting in the grant review panel, that too was going to sink us. So all of a sudden, that $40,000 project that my theater company wanted to put up, we're going to have to now make that a $20,000 project and fundraise that $20,000 all by ourselves. Which is a great thing to know if you're going to commit to something and going to go ahead and do it. But definitely had that gut-punching moment there in the room. So, in that gut-punching vein, how do you deal with that rejection? You talked about going in and talking to program officers. Do you, if you're an artist proposing a project, have multiple scenarios? How do you plan for these kinds of things?
I guess that's to me.
to hardly be 6
Well, and it's.
I guess, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
You've got
Kathee.
one shot a year at a lot of these funding opportunities, so it does feel kind of devastating when you aren't able to do the proposal that you wanted to do. What we've done with the new standards, sometimes with the tours or the grant proposals that we've done, we'll have a relationship with a presenter in a different city in Minnesota, and sometimes they'll want to bring us anyway, even without the grant funding, and we'll figure out a way to make that work and to get a deal together, and we'll still go. And that actually is a really useful exercise. You might not have the guarantee that you thought you were going to have, or be able to do the outreach opportunity that you wanted to do, but you can still go and play the show, build audience, and then the next time when you come, perhaps in a grant-funded way, you'll have more people in the audience, and I think it's just great relationship building.
Quite right. Actually, Bonnie, I don't know if anyone was at the previous panel with the people who do performing arts centers and stuff out state, but she talked about the fact that people are kind of, reluctant to go the first time. So sometimes if you go down one time, maybe you view it as like you're basically stiffing, you're playing for 30, 40 people or something like that. It's always worth it. It is always worth it. I can't tell you how many times I've gone and played for 10 or 15 people. If you can deliver to those 10 or 15 people and be the convincing, compelling artist that you are, and have those people walk out of the door feeling like they saw something amazing, those are your disciples, and they will go into the community and they will preach that you did something special. And if you get back there in a timely fashion where they can remember what happened to them that night and how changed they were by you, hopefully, they'll get more people out. You'll have 2 or 3 times as many the next time. And if you do it again, it's that, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, or whatever that old commercial is, and it'll build exponentially. It can be very surprising and delightful. And if it's a funded experience the next time, then maybe you even have some promotional materials and stuff like that around it.
If you can get a quote from that person about how much their life changed and then include that in your next grant application, that can also really help you tell the story about why your work is important and why it should be funded.
I think that's a good point too, because as you write more grants, you sort of build a toolkit that you draw from every time that you apply for a different funding opportunity. And you may not have anything right now when you're first getting started as far as an artist statement or an artist resume. Those may be things you've never really thought about before, or put into words or put on paper. But as you start applying for more grants, you'll sort of have those materials that you can draw from, and it makes it easier every time You'll get a really professional work sample put together, and that's an important part of making your case. There are some grants where for the first round of review, they only listen to your work. They don't read anything that you've written. They don't know who you are. They just listen to your work. And so to have a good professional work sample is always really important, to have that in your toolkit. To think about what your artist statement is, like if maybe you haven't gone through that exercise before of just writing an essay about who you are and what you do and why do you do it, you know? So just sort of think about those sorts of things and to put it into words, and those are the kinds of things that you'll use every time, because those things they'll change a little bit, but not you know, over the course of a year you're not going to completely change your art and what you're trying to do. So yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that in terms of the work I did at In the Heart of the Beast, that was always those number one, careful budgeting so that you aren't depending on money that was project-based to begin with, and so that it could be pulled out of the budget. So, you know, as an individual, not counting those chickens before they're hatched is really key, and not getting yourself into debt so that, you know, you're scrambling to get out if you've made a commitment that perhaps you shouldn't have, that was premature. So, you know, the whole thing of having a strong work sample is so important for the arts board. And so I would say if you're thinking of applying, you know, put your effort there, because that's in Artist Initiative, we are on a 100-point scale, and that's 40 of your points. And then coming up with the right project for where you fit, where you are in your career, that's going to help you take that next step is also key.
Yeah, I think what Kathee just said also speaks to knowing what the intentions of the funders are. State Arts Board is there to support artists in Minnesota to expand your career and really push you to take the next step, especially in that Artist Initiative grant. Really carefully reading what the grant is for will help you save a lot of heartache in not getting a grant that you weren't right for. So say the Night Arts Challenge that is open right now, it is for artist-led projects, creative projects that happen in St. Paul. If you don't read that and you propose something that's going to happen around the metro area, you're going to get nixed from that, like right off the gate. And if you didn't read that and get nixed, then you're going to feel really bad about that. Stop yourself from feeling bad by really reading through.
Read all of the eligibility.
All the
criteria.
eligibility.
If you're planning to present in a school
Yeah.
and you start applying for a grant, then you didn't read the bullet point that these projects can't be presented in schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely read the instructions. And also, I think the best piece of grant writing advice that I've ever received is just follow the instructions. Because for a lot of grants, you're the funding rate, depending on how many applicants they have, your odds are as good as 1 in 5, depending on what the grant is. So that's a pretty good chance. And so don't give the panel the opportunity to disqualify you just based on something stupid that you forgot, just a technicality that you overlooked. Don't make it easier for them to just discount your application based on an easy mistake that you could have prevented.
Yeah, in both big granting pools and large granting pools, panels, program officers, they're looking that you followed all the instructions.
Answer every
bullet point, hit all those points. That doesn't mean that you have to use up all the words on the word count. In fact, if you can be smarter, sharper, and more concise, you can make a program officer's day by being funnier and stand out.
Make it stand out. Yeah.
Make it stand out. But do what you use the words you have to use to get there. I want to.
I was just going to say about that is because, of course, that's going before a panel of 8 people. My sense of humor is going to be different from somebody else's. So be careful about humor. Just be straightforward with us. Now, another funder, that might not be necessary, but with us, you never know who's going to be reading that application.
Yes. Yeah.
I've seen it sink people.
We obviously can probably keep on talking about this, but let's have questions. We have conversation. Hi, Tom Loftus. How are you?
How's it going, Carl?
Good.
I have a question for Kathee. Have you seen because the music world has changed a lot in the last couple of years, have you seen a dramatic increase in music submissions for grants for the State Art Board, or remain flat and just for the rest of you, has that changed?
It really hasn't changed, and I've been there 6 years, and I've been tracking it that whole time. And typically, we get about 100 applications in the music pool, and that's pretty standard, between 100 and 115. So it varies from year to year, but overall, in Artist Initiative, I'm getting anywhere from 700 to 900 applications in a year. And we usually fund at about that 1 in 5 percentage.
And just a quick follow-up, has the type of music that you're seeing, has that shifted a little bit at all either, or is it typically more in like the neoclassical kind of experimental world?
No, I see everything,
Okay.
which is so great. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, within a discipline, is that do we have somebody who can talk intelligently about folk music? Do we have another person who can talk intelligently about hip hop and opera and, you know, and as John said, you know, having that voice on the panel is really, one of the things we do in looking at panels is, okay, who's our applicant pool? And what do we need to bring to that panel table in order to represent, you know, somebody who's coming in from opera? Where if we don't have an opera person there, they can't help the others understand, oh, this is really good, or no, this person is not quite ready for this grant.
Great. Question, go way to the back and then we'll come to you, okay? Yeah.
Hey there, I just joined, so apologies if you've already covered this, but what grant opportunities would you recommend for up-and-coming, emerging, independent musicians to apply for anything from starting your first record to going off on your first tour, and any other ways to share and create your work?
Yeah. The Metropolitan Regional Arts Council here in the metro area of the Twin Cities, it's funded through the Legacy Amendment for the most part.
Right.
I always like to think that like that is the most direct grant that it's a grant that you can get.
Well, their
Yeah.
individual money, though, is coming through their McKnight program.
Yes.
And that's actually more competitive than the Arts Board, believe it or not, in the metro area. That's not true out beyond the metro.
Mm-hmm.
But in the metro, Next Step is more competitive than Artist Initiative.
Yeah, so there's the Next Step grant there. I'll also say this about thinking about your practice, is that Springboard, for the arts where I work, we run an incubator fiscal sponsorship program. And what that is that it allows artist-led projects to apply for grants for their arts organization. So if you're thinking more expansively about your work, and not just thinking, oh, I want to fund this record, but I want to put on a series of community concerts that then draw in new audiences that inform my work and that change the way that I think about my stuff. That's something that would be perfect for an arts activities grant or for one of the community grants at the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council. So I think a challenge to individual artists is to think not just about you and your practice, but what is your practice in the context of this community? How can we be doing things in a broader context and get some funding for those things? That'll help support your work as an artist, broaden your community connections, and get you and your community partners some money to do interesting things together.
Artist Initiative, though, is that I would say that seems like the most natural fit for somebody who's, you know, just operating as an independent artist or a small ensemble or something like that. You're kind of applying for your group. It is quite a straightforward grant. It's not complicated. I mean, you have to still write a compelling and solid grant and have great work samples. But it's doable. It's very doable, I'd say.
And you write it in the first person. I will do this, I will do that, not we. And you also, just to understand that it's taxable income. And so the record keeping is important so that you don't end up paying payroll taxes on a full grant amount when you actually bought a synthesizer with half of it.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
Follow-up question to that, besides that it's good, that like harkens on discussion earlier today with one of the keynote speakers. With that said, for those different grant opportunities, what are some grant opportunities to bring the community together through a concert series and things like that?
Well, one of the things I can tell you, and I would say the State Arts Board and probably the regional arts councils are moving more and more and more towards not the idea that these grants are, to help artists, but they are to help all Minnesotans participate in the arts. So I came back to this idea. Those of you who are old enough will remember President Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I've sort of brought that down to the state level. Ask not what your state can do for you, ask what you can do for your state. And so as you're thinking about those community concerts, think about in that kind of vein. What is it that you can do that is going to make somebody else's life a better life? You'll have income because you'll be performing it, but that this is going to be something that takes them, whether they're in a school, whether they're in a just a community member, or whether they're a senior citizen, to a new place for them.
Yeah.
So.
And I think including that kind of description is really what makes a compelling project proposal, is if you can talk about how, if you're bringing your project to a smaller community in rural Minnesota, for example, how is this going to benefit the community? And those are great things.
And do they really want it?
Do they want it?
Do they want it?
Do they want it?
And
That's the
to
question.
have that
Yeah.
kind of information
Yeah.
that really makes you feel like you can be honest and authentic in this.
I just had one other organization to maybe add into the mix there for this idea of doing concert-to-concert series or something like that. And I don't really know that much about this grant, but it kind of popped onto my radar screen last year, the year before last, and that's the Bush Events Grant. I don't know anybody who...
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about
Okay.
that. So the Bush Foundation has a whole wide array of granting opportunities. One thing that they've just recently rolled out is this Bush Events Grant, which is a rolling deadline, which means you can apply for it essentially anytime. They have a couple quarterly cycles for granting, and it really is around events that bring people together. So again, it is a question of what can I do for the community, what can the community do for me, and that reciprocity. But that's a good place to look if you are being expansive about the way you think about your arts practice. Yeah, let's go here.
2 questions. Do you always write it as an individual, even if you're part of a band?
For Artist Initiative, yes. And you can hire your band members, but what you have to be talking about is how this project is going to help you. Because you may be with this band now, but who knows where you're going to be in 20 years. So that whatever you learn from this experience, you will take with you.
Then,
But that's in the State Arts Board Artist
Yeah.
Initiative Grant.
Yeah.
This goes to the point about really reading what the grant guidelines are. There are grants out there that are really about what the community partnership is, what you're doing, and in that case, it'd be totally appropriate to write it as a group of people, or
Yeah.
we together will do this work. So that goes to doing your research about what the grant is really for and how to tailor your approach to that grant. Yeah.
and then, do you always have to be part of a official business? Like, do you need to be an LLC or maybe something else?
No.
And sometimes you'll be applying for a grant as an individual, but you'll be competing against other like arts, like for the arts tour, for example. You might be competing against I don't know what's a good example of
The St. Paul Chamber
James Sewell,
Orchestra.
St. Paul Chamber, James Sewell Ballet.
Yeah.
So an organization that has maybe a grant writer on staff, or
Yeah.
is functioning as a 501c3. We spoke a little bit about fiscal agency, and you might see that come up with grants that you're looking at. An individual can't receive funds from, for example, from the State Arts Board. They need to use the 501c3 nonprofit status of another organization, sort of serving as an umbrella. So that's something.
Except in Artist Initiative
Yep,
and
thank you.
Cultural Community Partnership.
Yep.
Those two things. Sorry.
That's okay. No, that's a good distinction. So that's part of the homework you'd have to do, is to establish a relationship with a fiscal sponsor. And I know Springboard does it.
Yep.
Minnesota Music Coalition also can serve as a fiscal sponsor.
We're actually not yet doing it, but it's a program that's in development.
Okay.
Yeah, so Springboard, we support over 200 artists and artist-led projects across the state with that fiscal sponsorship program, and that's not just grants, but also taking tax-deductible donations on behalf of your project. So if that's something that's interesting to you, we can definitely carry on that conversation. So a hand here, and then we'll go here. Go, Charlie.
Just one thing on that LLC thing, noticed that the MRAC grants, actually, you can't apply.
Right,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
cannot be, and same with the arts board as well.
Yep.
But question, kind of on, like, generally, grants are, like you said, community-based, but let's say if you're a recording artist more so than a performer, do you think, like, if you had a listening party or something community-based, is that a little less competitive than, like, a live performance?
Yeah, our program, again, Artist Initiative requires a community component. And so for, in some cases, let's say you're a sound engineer. Now, you could apply as a sound engineer and you want to do some project. So what do you do as a sound engineer for a community component? You're a part of a project, but you're not the performer, so to speak. And so what I would recommend in that case is think a little broad, in a broader way. And perhaps there's, maybe you grew up in Crookston, and you could go back to Crookston and talk to the high school band kids and discuss about how it is that I became a sound engineer. As we all know, anytime when we were in high school and some professional came in, it was such a big deal. And, I think those opportunities really can help a panel say, that would be really great, because I remember myself what that felt like. And so I think there are ways around it,
Yeah.
or ways through it.
So is there a web link or something that you can go to and see the more comprehensive list of granting agencies and maybe some deadlines and maybe?
So Springboard for the Arts does run, we curate a grants calendar that has both resources in Minnesota and then also some nationally curated resources. So springboardforthearts.org, if you click on the Thrive as an Artist tab, you'll see grants, resources, and also information about our fiscal sponsorship program. Kathee brought flyers, so you can just take things with you.
Yes, with all
right
our
away from here.
programs, yep.
Minnesota Council for Nonprofits is another good resource.
And MRAC.
MRAC, yes. MRAC actually has this really interesting partnership with this organization called Access Philanthropy that has this database for all the grantors in the metro area and beyond. So, and a lot of different ways to slice that. So you can search by individuals, by people funding community arts, by people funding all sorts of different projects. So the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council website has a great resource there.
And it's under their resources.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Back to Tom.
I was going to say, and kind of going along with that, with the news blast that Ryan sends out for the Minnesota Music Coalition, that he pulls a few grants aside usually in those. So sometimes you might not be reading all the way to the bottom. The bottom is like where the really juicy stuff is for that. And the other one that I'd point you to, just because I've served on this commission, is the Cedar Arts. The Cedar Cultural Center has an annual grant that they give out for new debuts of new work. That's fairly substantial. It's about $7,000.
It's
They
called
have
the
information on their website, but there's
416?
516.
it used to be called the 416 Commissions for their address. It's now called the Cedar Commissions. They just did a rebranding and rename, but that usually pops up in June. And in that most of these, I would say, the State Arts Board, MRAC, and all these seasonally, they happen at the same time. So if you want to set that calendar to every year, like as a reminder, the time to kind of put like a little bookmark for you. I know Cedar Cultural Center, their call for proposals is in June, even though the performances are in January. So kind of keep that in mind, that there's like a difference between when they're given out and
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point that we didn't touch on. If you are doing a project in a week, a grant is not the appropriate way to fund it. To talk about the grant's timeline, it's inevitably at least a month, if not several months, for review, and then there'll be project deadlines or project start dates that you can work from. So I go back to the point of starting your research early and your planning early in the grants process for your work.
Yeah, usually there's a back end on it too. It's not. It's the grant activity, the funded activity has to happen within a certain time frame.
Yeah.
I think the idea of the toolbox that Becky talked about is a really good one. I think it speaks a little bit to the thing Tom said. If you do some research and you figure out what the schedule of these things is, and you develop a toolbox of your like, I didn't have a resume until just a couple years ago because I didn't need one. I didn't have any point. I didn't ever have a job. The only job I ever had was the job I applied myself to, you know. But then once you have to like start presenting yourself in a way to these granting organizations, you have to start writing a resume. You have to start developing work samples. You have to start thinking about who it is that you are as an artist. What you know, why do I do it? I mean, I couldn't have really told you in any kind of organized way why I do what I do until I started applying for these grants. I just did it because it's what I do. But when you have to explain it to somebody, that's another thing for you to have in your, it's another hammer or whatever in your toolbox. And once you have that toolbox assembled and you've got all these materials, applying for these grants becomes much easier. It's that usually the actual application process is not that complicated unless it's the art store grant, in which case it's incredibly complicated. But most of them are pretty straightforward. And you know, if you're a real artist, all you do is have ideas all the time about what it is you want to do next. And you know, the granting organizations are hungry for your ideas, and they're hungry for you to have those ideas out in the world. And once you have the toolbox, and once you got the ideas, once you got that calendar, you can just cycle, and you can, you know, eventually you'll hit one, and it is a great feeling to know I've got the resources to actually accomplish this vision that I have for my work. It's a really wonderful feeling, and I hope it's a feeling that everybody in this room gets to have, and if we play any small role in that, I'll feel like it was well worth my hour.
Yeah. I'll say too, I mean, MMC is a really great resource for this kind of stuff. Springboard for the Arts runs a professional development workshop series called Work of Art that has resources on artist statements, writing an artist resume, on grant writing and fundraising. We offer those workshops for free around the cities through the library systems, and we have the toolkit as a curriculum that you can just download for free from our website. So again, springboardforthearts.org, and look at the Thrive as an Artist resources there.
And sometimes there's a webinar. You can, there will be like an instructional thing where you can log in, ask questions live with other people, or they record them and then you can watch it later and set the speed to 1.5 times so that it goes a little bit faster. Just listen for the one thing that you want to know. Yeah, those are also really helpful too.
Totally. Yeah, last question, and then let's go.
We talked about everything except for like dollar amount. What's the likelihood of something like fairly ambitious actually getting funded?
Define fairly ambitious.
Like above 10,000, like closer to 20,000.
Totally. Yeah. I mean
there are limits. I mean some
right.
grants are up to $10,000. The art store goes to $120,000. $150 now.
Yeah.
In Artist Initiative, 10,000 is the largest grant you can get from us, but you can have other funding coming into that as well.
Yep.
So if you can piece things together, that's possible, including earned income at a reasonable level.
Yeah. This is also something that we should point out too, is that some grants out there will have matching requirements. So the grant might be, I mean, for the Night Arts Challenge that's open right now, you can get up to $30,000, but that's also a one-to-one match. So you have to be able to raise another 30 on top of that 30.
Which you can do through
ticket sales, through Kickstarter, through donated income. There's like however you want to piece that together, but that's something that in your reporting is going to be, you know, you have to show that you match these things. So again, that goes to reading through the fine lines and the details of the grant proposals.
The other thing I would recommend is think of your project, if you can, in segments. So perhaps it is a big project that has touring involved, but the production of the CD, you know, is just you could come to the arts board for that, which doesn't have a match and doesn't have, so think if there's ways you can segment a project into pieces so that you can go to a single funder for it.
Instead of like, I have one big like $150,000 project, you got 5 $20,000 projects, it's a lot easier to fundraise in those chunks. Yeah. One more question here, and then we'll.
Are the funding levels really black and white, so the budget determines this is what I need for the project, or do any of these grants actually look and say, just based on what we have here today, there's not $20,000, however, we can fund at a level of 10?
That really depends on the funder. In
Yeah.
our case, it doesn't, people try to, think, well, maybe if I only ask for 5, the panel will think better of me. Not necessary in art, at the arts board. That isn't the case necessarily with other funders.
That's it, and that goes to doing your research, looking at what other funders have funded in the past. Most of that is either public information or findable information. So if you see that, a foundation that you think is a right fit has made 10 grants of $7,500 and 2 grants of $50,000, don't go for the 50. Yeah, look at that $7,500 and build your project around that ask. Let's go to Galen Lee's talk about making the scene more accessible. If you leave with anything today, think about planning and getting in advance. Foundations, funders, program officers, they want your ideas. They are hungry for your ideas. They look good when you look good, when they fund good work. So talk to them, get their feedback, and get them engaged. And then don't be afraid to ask questions. Do your research. Let's all get some money. Let's make some beautiful things. Thanks so much for being here, everybody.